All right, so in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to do the What Do Historians Do activity. So this is a great way to start the year, a great way to show students, as the name suggests, what historians do. So I got this lesson from MrRotten.com. I'll leave a link to that lesson in the description of this video. So there are three things that we teach our students that historians do, which is they collect information, they consider the information, and they communicate that information with others. So today I'm going to be showing you guys the two parts, which is the collect and the consider. The communicate I won't, because that'll be different depending on how or what style of writing you use in order to communicate historical thinking. But for now, let's go ahead and get started with this first one. So mine's going to be in Spanish because I teach in Spanish. But again, the link is going to be in English, right? So if you want the Spanish version, just let me know and I can get that to you as well. So first thing that we teach our students is that truth exists and truth needs to be backed up with evidence, right? That there are things that are true, that's what history is about, but we need to gather evidence, gather information in order to be able to find out what happened in the past. That is basically the job of a historian. So we teach them that the most important word in history because of this is because, right? They have to be able to explain their thinking. And that's kind of the main idea of our course, is explaining the why as it relates to history. So again, the first part here is to collect information. So what we teach them is, as a historian, one of the first things that you have to do is collect the information, right? Just the basic facts, just like a cop would. When they pull someone over, they're just getting the basic facts. No interpretation, just facts, right? License and registration, how fast were you going, what were you doing and such. All this information, they're just collecting information, and that's it. That's the first thing that historians do, is collect information. So the next thing that we do in order to illustrate this point is a little activity called Crush. So the whole scenario here is that you imagine that there's a new student that comes into the school that you think is really attractive, right? And that really already gets the students way engaged because, hormones and such. So what the students are supposed to do is they're supposed to write a list of things that they could do in order to find out more information about this person, just as you do when you're learning history, right? When we're learning history, I tell them that's what we're doing. We're basically trying to learn about these dead people from the past, essentially, right? That it's our goal. So I asked them to make a list of ways they can get information. So they start saying things like, well, we can ask a friend of theirs information about them. Then they start getting creepy, like, oh, we can follow them around, see what they eat, see, what clothes they wear and such. And I tell them, that's what I want to hear. Let's get even creepier. And then they start saying things like, oh, you can stalk them on social media, right? You can find their Facebook or their Instagram or what have you in order to find out information. And again, that's what I tell them at the end. That's what we do as historians. We're basically stalking these dead people that lived in the past in order to find out what their life was like. So then after that, we talk about sources of information, right? We talk about things that can help us find out information about these people from the past. So we talk about, things like artifacts, how you can make observations, documentaries, podcasts, interviews, fossils, diaries, bones, and such. That all these things can help us find more information about these people that lived in the past. That's the goal of a historian. So the next thing here, the next little activity is called the Cookie Crumbles. So what they do here is, in order to learn a little bit more about archaeologists, who are an important piece of gathering artifacts, what they do is you basically give them a cookie, and what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to essentially, using two toothpicks, they're supposed to take out the chocolate chips, and those chocolate chips are meant to represent artifacts. And the whole point of this is to have them understand how you have to be very careful, and it's such a tedious, long process to take out these chocolate chips, right? I don't want to see them stabbing the chocolate chip. I tell them not to do that because these are precious artifacts, right? As we're going to learn, artifacts are very rare for the most part and very fragile, so we need to be very careful with them. So there they are, poking away very carefully, delicately at the cookie in order to experience what it's like to essentially be an archaeologist. So that's a fun little activity there. Then we get to consider. Okay, so this is the second of the three PowerPoints. So this is called consider. And first, I explain, what does that mean? What do we mean when we talk about historians considering information? And what we talk here is, we talk about analyzing this information, right? After you collect the basic facts, the basic artifacts, the basic information, You have to interpret this information and connect it to information we already know. So questions to ask yourself is, what does other evidence show? Has this person done this before? Does this story make sense? These are the kind of questions when you're considering information that you have to have in the back of your mind, right? So things like bias are really important when it comes to studying history. So in order to show them this, we do a little puzzle activity. So basically, what happens here is that they are given. So I have a puzzle piece or puzzle pieces, and the puzzle itself doesn't really matter because they're not actually going to be putting the puzzle together. In fact, we want them to fail, right? So what we do is we divide up this puzzle, right, with at least, that's have at least, I don't know, like 500 pieces, a big puzzle, and we put about 8 to 10 puzzle pieces. We put them in a little baggie, and we give each student random parts of the puzzle. Just throw them all in there. Doesn't matter if they fit or not. Again, it's even better if they don't fit. So we throw them all in a little baggie, and each student gets a little baggie with 8 to 10 pieces, and you tell them essentially put the pieces together. Quickly, they start to learn that there are missing gaps, there are not gaps, missing puzzle pieces in this puzzle, and that is meant to symbolize artifacts, right? That's one of the hardest things about being a historian, is that we are missing a lot of pieces of history, so to speak, right? That we don't have all the artifacts, we don't have all the diaries, we don't have all the information about the people from the past, right? Then we ask a couple questions to get them thinking about this, right? So, for example, here it says, what are the types of pieces that a historian could find? So that's when they're going to talk about, oh, they can find diaries, they can find artifacts, right? So, in other words, what sources of information can we find, right? That's what the puzzle pieces represent, sources of information from the past, primary sources specifically. So the question here is, what happens when you don't have all the pieces, right? When you don't have all the pieces, what do you have to do in order to try to piece together the puzzle of history? And the answer to that is, of course, you take educated guesses, right? You use what you can and you fill in the gaps with an educated guess about what might have made sense, right? So, for example, if we find a Mayan temple and you find I don't know, you find knives and you find blood. You kind of, you don't maybe have the bodies of the dead people that were sacrificed, but you can assume that some sort of violence happened here, right? And that's what it means to, to analyze and to consider information from history, right? Sometimes you're not going to get the full picture, and you take educated guesses given the information that you do have. So next question here is, what happens if some pieces are broken or incomplete, right? Sometimes we find artifacts that are incomplete, broken. What do you have to do then, right? So again, kind of similar to the second question, right? Similar answer. All right, so consider level two. So now what you're going to do is, what the students are going to do, I should say, is that we're going to build on that first activity we did with the crush. Now we're going to say, okay, we're going to find you, or you take, or somehow you get the backpack of this person that you have a crush on, and you find 3 artifacts, okay? And they're just random things. You can even change these if you want, right? The whole idea, though, is that they find these artifacts, and what you're supposed to do is try to find information about the student based off of these 3 artifacts that you find. Because again, that's what historians do. When we find artifacts, we try to figure out how these artifacts might have been used, right? That's the whole point here, how they might have been used, and what does that tell us about the civilization we're studying. So again, going back to the whole Mayan example, if we find sacrificial knives, then that might show us that the Mayans maybe did sacrifices, right? That tells us, well, maybe they were pretty violent, or maybe they were very religious, they were dedicated to their religion, or what have you, right? What information can we get from that artifact? So that's what they're practicing here, um, by analyzing these different artifacts. They write 1 or 2 sentences explaining, what do these artifacts or these things found in the backpack of this student tell us about the student itself? Because remember, that's our whole goal, finding information about this crushed out that we have in the school, right? Just like a historian trying to find information about these people from the past. All right, then there's a little video. I can't share this video with you guys, but basically, it's a Little Mermaid, the little clip where, a little bird here is trying to figure out what these different human artifacts are. Just meant to show,
Oh, it's really creepy human stuff, huh? Hey, look, this is, wow. This is special. This is.
So again, that's what historians do, right? They try to figure out what these artifacts are. All right, so the next thing here that we do, part of this activity, is now we're going to look at bias and not so much bias, actually more like motivation. When you're analyzing a source of information, you have to keep in mind why that person might be saying what they're saying, right? So for example, the first one here, the first scenario is a little kid that the mom finds up with chocolate all over his face, and the mom asks him, "Why did you eat my chocolate?" And the boy responds, "No, mommy, I love you." And that's what the students have to figure out. The motivation of the kid, why is he saying, "No, mommy, I love you," right? Obviously, the answer is because he's trying not to get in trouble, right? So again, they have to write why the kid is saying what they're saying. So they're saying this because the kid doesn't want to get in trouble, right? So the next scenario here is you go to the swap meet, you find some nice tacos that you want to eat. And when you see them, they don't look so good, right? But then you ask the vendor, the person selling them, you ask them, "Hey, are these tacos good?" And the vendor says, "These are the best tacos I've ever had in my life." So the question here is, again, same thing. Why is this person trying to sell you tacos saying that these tacos are so good? Again, to understand motivation. And of course, the answer here is because he's trying to make some money, right? He's trying to sell you some tacos, right? So again, I talk about how as historians we need to be careful when we're analyzing information, and that we have to try to understand why the author of a document might be writing what they're writing, right? What is their more motivation for sharing this information, right? All right. So there's a couple of these different scenarios. They're mostly pretty funny ones, right? Meant to get the students engaged. So the next thing here, we learned about cause and effect, or we learned about cause and effect, right? So just a little video clip, and the students have to answer what happened in order for this to happen, right? In order for his eyes to become like this, and the effect, what happened because his eyes turned like this. And it's just very basic. And then they answer those two questions, right? A little video clip, and then consider level 5. So here, what they have to do is I show them a part of this painting, and I ask the students, based on only on this part of the painting, what do you think the rest of the painting will be about? So a lot of them will be like, "Oh, maybe it's a war scene. There's some sort of battle going on." I say, "Okay." And then you, same thing. Now, only based off of the first two that you've seen. So the first part that we saw, and now this part of the painting, what do you think the rest of the painting will be about? And we're like, "Oh, maybe it's some sort of competition." Or they can say, "No, I still think it's a battle scene," or what have you. And again, same thing. What do you think the rest of the painting will be about based on this? And then finally, with this part, what do you think the rest of the painting or the whole painting is about? And then at the end, you show them and you explain to them, these are gladiators, blah, blah, right? And that is pretty much it for the collect and the consider portion of the What Do Historians Do activities, which I usually do the first couple days of my history class. But with that, thank you guys for watching. I'm planning to do a bunch of these. So stay tuned if you want to have explanations to different little activities and lessons that I do. A lot of these, like I said, come from MrRowan.com. So definitely check that out. Again, the link to this a link to this lesson itself will be in the description of this video.